it's not a police issue. It's a society issue. You know, impoverished neighborhoods, people without hope do these kinds of things. You show me a man that doesn't have hope, I'll show you one that's willing to pick up a gun and do anything with it.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Chicago Tonight. On this Tuesday, September 20th, we're here with community leaders from around Chicago for an hour-long conversation about the root causes of Chicago's violence and what can be done to stop it. That's next on Chicago Tonight. There is no other way to put it. Chicago is now in crisis mode. Each week, the number of murders in Chicago ticks higher as the city faces its worst homicide rate in 20 years. So far in 2016, more than 500 people have been killed in the city. And on Thursday, in what could be his most important speech as mayor, Rahm Emanuel is scheduled to announce what he calls a comprehensive public safety plan. It will focus on what he calls the 4 Ps: policing, punishment, prevention, and parenting. Over the course of the next hour, we'll discuss the outline of that plan and talk through specific solutions to violence in Chicago's neighborhoods. But first, here's Paris Schutz with some of what is known about the mayor's announcement.
Mayor Emanuel refused to take questions today as he prepares for his major address on violence Thursday evening at Malcolm X College. He first revealed the plan on Chicago Tonight last month.
It's a very complicated or complex set of problems that will be addressed in a very comprehensive way. Everything from our police to what we got to do for our children and their safety, to dealing with guns, holding criminals accountable, and making sure that we're also providing hope where there's despair.
The mayor is expected to announce the hiring of additional police officers. City Council Black Caucus Chairman Roderick Sawyer says he expects the number to be between 200 and 300, but the Associated Press is reporting 500 new police officers.
When people ask, for example, why does it take an hour to respond to a 911 call, it's because we're not properly staffed. We don't have the staffing levels that we need to be to fully serve the citizens of the city of Chicago.
But mayoral aides say the speech will also focus on broader societal issues that lead to violence, like parenting, the lack of jobs, and mentoring programs.
Violence is a result of a lot of social ills. Unfortunately, social ills of society are dumped at the doorstep of the police department, and then they're not able to handle all that. So I think we're taking a holistic look at what's driving it, and we're trying to address it.
Today, Alderman Sawyer hosted Culinary Kids, a program that teaches children how to cook and eat healthy foods. He says the mayor should raise more money from the private sector for programs like this that keep kids occupied when they're not in school.
Whether it be youth baseball, basketball, after-school programs, we don't have any great degree of those. Kids are wandering the streets. When the kids wander the streets, they're going to get into some kind of mischief, and the mischief has been much more dangerous as of late.
Yesterday, ousted former top cop Gary McCarthy blamed this year's rash of violence on the increased scrutiny of police officers in the wake of the Laquan McDonald controversy.
We have less effective policing in this country right now, based upon the political climate that's been created by a number of different venues, and that is empowering criminals.
The mayor and Superintendent Eddie Johnson are also focusing on the state's gun laws, with new legislation expected to be announced in coming weeks that would toughen prison sentences for felons with repeat gun offenses. But prison reform groups believe there is no correlation between tougher sentences and lower crime.
Prison may incapacitate people, but it doesn't deter them from doing it. If we want to stop people from committing violent crime, we need to find ways on the front end to keep guns from getting into their hands initially.
In recent days, Superintendent Johnson has also rolled out plans for more body cameras and increased de-escalation training for police, as Chicago wrestles with the dubious distinction of having more homicides than New York and Los Angeles combined. For Chicago Tonight, this is Paris Schutz.
And we'll have coverage and reaction to the mayor's speech Thursday night. But now here in the studio, we've gathered a panel of 11 diverse voices to talk about Chicago's violence and how to reduce it. We'll also be joined by WBEZ's Chip Mitchell from the station's West Side Bureau. Tonight's show is being live streamed online, and we welcome you to join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag #ChicagoTonight. First of all, as we mentioned, the mayor's plan, the outline includes 4 Ps. One of them includes parenting, and he wants reportedly the mayor wants to address the role of absentee fathers. Why is that important for the city to address? Andrea Zopp, your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that report is completely accurate. It was a hearsay statement based on a meeting that the mayor was having as he was going around in the community talking to people to get feedback from them on the report. The mayor is absolutely going to look at the need for positive male role models and the lack of that in too many lives, as there are a number of people sitting here tonight who are focused on that issue about creating role models for our young people. And so that's going to be a big part of his topic, and the need for mentoring and the impact that that can have.
But will he specifically address the issue of, quote, absentee fathers as a component of as part of the argument in support of the need for mentoring and so forth?
As I said, Phil, he's going to talk about the absence of positive male role models, the importance of character, the importance of filling the holes in young people's lives to address that, and the critical role that proven mentoring programs have had in addressing violence. So that's going to be one part of several of what I expect that you will hear from the mayor.
Jamal Cole, how about that? Is the absence of positive role models something that this mayor should take up? Should put out in the public square?
Well, I think the mayor must be doing something right because people believe he has the power to change things. I think the mayor and his appointees are temporary, and the real power in our city is with the groups that exist before and after each mayor. And I think we should be looking at what can we do on our block instead of depending on city-level government. What can we do on our block to get to know our teenagers, get to know our neighbors? What can we do ourselves?
Anybody else have thoughts on the mayor's raising the issue of positive male role models? Reverend?
Well, I just don't know if you can talk about parenting without talking about the stressors that are on families in this city. When you look at a lot of the policies, particularly the tax, the fines, the fees, and the impact that this has disproportionately on struggling families. So you can't really talk about what parents ought to do when the families themselves are fragile, fractured, and really under all kinds of financial pressures. It's very difficult, for example, for a poor family to hold on to an automobile in Chicago. Really with just almost the city confiscating cars. And so I think we need to really talk about family-friendly public policies.
For example, how can struggling families be helped, be supported in the way you're talking about?
Well, I grew up in public housing. And then I went to a public school. And then I went to Western Illinois University, which was a land-grant college. And so when I think of the way public funds were used to create opportunities for families, particularly in this town, in particular, really across the country, when European families found themselves in the same kind of stressed economic environments, government moved to put in place housing support, public school investment, and really that sense that we can talk about parenting without talking about the real stresses that families are under in this city.
Nika Jones-Tapia, you're not just the head of the county jail, you run the jail, but you're a psychologist by training. Stresses that families are under that could potentially lead to having one of their family members incarcerated in the county jail. What are you seeing?
Well, I think the conversation has to lend itself to trauma. We can't discuss the violence in the city of Chicago without understanding that unhealed trauma begets trauma. And when we're looking at the violence that's occurring in our neighborhoods, we know that we have to welcome behavioral health experts to the table to discuss what we can do as a united front, not just parents, but the whole community, to begin to heal our children, our fathers, and our mothers with the crisis that they're facing.
Amy Campanelli, from your perspective as somebody whose job it is to oversee the office that defends people who find themselves in the criminal justice system, What do you see as something that, steps that can be taken to help families that are under stress?
Well, I agree with Dr. Jones. The big issue is trauma, and we have to sort of look at the trauma. Because when I have 20 kids in the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center, and I ask every one of those kids, I say, how many here have been a victim of gun violence? 19 of the 20 kids raised their hand. They have been a victim. And the 20th kid was stabbed. So that's where it starts. They were victims before they became the offenders in the juvenile system. And when my felony offenders come out of prison, they can't get public housing, right? Because they're a convicted felon. If you don't have a place to lay your head and to at least sleep, you aren't going to be able to survive in the community. So all of us sitting here need to collaborate, coordinate our efforts. We're all sort of working and doing great work, but not together, and work with these communities that we are helping to serve. We can make a big difference if we really look at people coming out of prison, like Ms. Volan-Katz on the TV before said, stop them from going to prison, stop them from entering the jail, and we could really do a lot together, I think. That's what we need to do.
Lori Lightfoot, you wanted to say something on parenting
I want to pick up on the comments that I think Reverend Hatch made, which were very thoughtful and right on. I think it's dangerous territory to go into the question of parenting in this context. We've had unprecedented levels of violence this summer. We've had literally the streets feeling like they are dripping in the blood of young children and kids by the levels of violence certainly brought on by illegal guns. And I think it's a very complicated, nuanced issue that, frankly, all of us should tread lightly on because of the context. You can't make comments about parenting and absentee fathers without putting it into the context of the stresses that these families and these communities have been under. When you look at many of these communities that are suffering from high crime, there are also communities that have double-digit, in some instances higher, poverty rates, unemployment, people who have just stopped looking for jobs. So I think that in order to, what I hope I hear, I hope we all hear on Thursday night, is something that talks about a plan to invest in those communities and those families so that we can raise people up and provide them with real hope, jobs, dealing with ex-offenders, many of the things that all of us, either individually or collectively, have been dealing with. But it's got to be a big, comprehensive strategy for the future, for sure, but I think also what people are waiting to hear and expect is what's the plan right now to drive these numbers down, because even though historically we're still at a rate that's lower than we were in the 90s, if we look at the more recent past, the numbers are shooting through the roof, and people want to feel like there is a plan and that there's a hope and there's a strategy for bringing those numbers back down.
Victor Dickinson.
Yeah, I agree with Lori and Reverend Hatch. I think you can't talk about parenting and fathers without talking about mass incarceration. I mean, we've had 2 decades of locking up fathers and putting them away in prison, taking them out of the families, out of the community. Now people are coming back. The question is, what are we going to do with folks who come back and they have all sorts of barriers: housing, education, employment, public assistance. What are we going to do to get this high unemployment rate? The results came out that said Illinois has the highest black unemployment rate out of all 50 states. And we know from earlier in the year, reports released that showed that we have almost 40% of 20 to 24-year-olds that are out of school and out of work. What are we going to do to bring opportunity? I mean, that really needs to be it. We can't police and punish our way out of this problem, which was created by the lack of opportunity for decades. So where's the massive investment and opportunity for people? That's what we really need.
Eddie Bocanegra, you've been very public about your struggles as a young person, the fact that you killed someone, you spent 14 years in prison. What was your experience like when you came out of prison in terms of a support system that would help you make the transition to help you turn your life around, as you clearly have?
So I think there's a couple of things. On my end, I had the luxury of having a family support there, which I think that in many of the communities we work with, there really is a lack of whether it's family, whether it's caring adults that really want to support these individuals. So I think a part of it is having support system on one end. I think the other part is that the reality, as it was kind of shared today, is this whole notion around hope. The truth is that when I came home, I had siblings that instilled hope in me about a better tomorrow. And if I look at some of our communities today, even the Superintendent Eddie Johnson mentioned, when you have people who have no hope, what's there to be expected of them? And in many cases, if I think about even the kids that we serve at the Y, I think about those who have a set of resiliency and what makes that resiliency and why is it that these kids continue to develop and grow. And the same thing for people that we tend to hire who have records as well. How do we invest in our communities? I think is the bigger question. And at the same time, understand that it takes a holistic approach. It takes a village to be able to support an individual. We talk about mentoring. We got to think about creative ways of how to mentor not only our kids, but how to mentor parents in many cases. I strongly believe that many of our parents don't know what it really looks like or what are the skills that are needed to be a parent.
What skills might some parents be lacking?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just planning. Planning, sustainability, thinking about what career paths can people take. But I think more importantly, there's fundamental needs. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if parents have a foundation of feeling safe in their communities, at their home, if they know that they don't have to struggle to provide food for themselves and their family, that allows people the sense of hope that they are able to strive to do better for themselves and their community.
Berto Aguayo, the mayor wants to expand the Becoming a Man program, that's a mentoring program, which has a demonstrated track record. To what extent can mentoring make up for a weak family structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think mentoring can go a very long way in helping a lot of young males in our communities. And I think, as has been mentioned before, the key question is, how do we invest in our communities and where do we invest and the programs that we're investing in. And I think when it comes to male role models in our communities, I think a lot of the role models that could have been role models to me growing up left because they didn't want to be part of the neighborhood. They left because of the violence. And I think we have to start.
Did you have a male role model that helped guide you?
I had a couple along the way who helped me. I had a lot of individuals who tried to help me out. And I think that's one of the things that we have to start thinking about. We have to start thinking of how can we redefine what success looked like in our communities. Typically, we tell a kid, success is to get out the hood. And I think we need to start telling kids that success is making the hood better and being that role model for these younger kids, because the more people that will stay in our neighborhoods that are making a difference or are successful individuals can go a very long way, not just a mentoring program.
As we mentioned, Chip Mitchell will be joining us from Chicago's West Side, and he's joining us now, Chip Mitchell. Chip, reaction from community leaders you've spoken with about some of what we expect to hear from Mayor Emanuel's plan.
Well, Phil, I did get a chance to speak with several people, and one thing, I mean, they're starting to hear about this 4 Ps bit that the mayor is using apparently in some of these focus groups: policing, punishment, prevention, and parenting. So I spoke with a pastor in the Austin neighborhood, had a very strong reaction to that. He said one of the P's is missing, the most important P, poverty. He says we need large-scale investment in jobs. Otherwise, it's just, and here's another P, it's just PR, as in public relations. And so I've been doing a little bit of research on and off over the years, and we have a huge problem with unemployment among youths in this city, especially black youths, and especially on the south and the west side. So the Brookings Institution, for example, had a study out just a couple months ago that found that young black youths in their early 20s, aged 20 to 24, the unemployment rate is almost 50% still. And how many years are we out of this recession, Phil?
Chip, are you hearing anything in reaction to the mayor's plan to raise the issue of the lack of positive male role models?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Phil. I spoke with a veteran police officer. He's a patrol officer who lives and works on the west side. He actually, in his off hours, he's a volunteer football coach. And one of the points he wanted to make is it's important for people not just to blame the police, is something that he's very sensitive to. But people in their neighborhoods, everyone in the city really has a responsibility. The public has a responsibility to step up and do something about public safety. It may be plugging into a mentoring program. It may be working with, I don't know, a Boy Scout troop. It may be helping out school teachers in your neighborhood. In his case, he coaches a football team. But this police officer here on the West Side, and he's somebody very invested in the community. He lives here. That was the one point he wanted to make.
Chip, thank you very much, and we'll get back to you later in the hour. Malcolm London, what are your thoughts on improving the relationship between police and young people? For example, I don't know if you saw this picture in the paper the other day. There were police officers investigating a crime. There were a couple, three of them, and there was a group of young men, and according to the caption, the young men were jeering the police at the crime scene. What are your thoughts about the way police and young people can sort of come to a better place?
Well, I think, one, this idea that the problem here is that policing is the problem. How we police in this country and how we police in this city prevents me and young people from feeling safe around police, literally. If I'm a police officer, whether I'm playing catch, I've seen a lot of these on newspapers or whatever, and I don't have the training. I still have the wherewithal to murder and kill anybody in this neighborhood without any accountability. Those are real issues. And so the surface level of, buddy police officers, I think we have a long way to go. And I don't think communities need police in them if they had all of these things that we talk about, jobs, mental health services. This is the same mayor who isn't talking about opening up the clinics that he closed in my neighborhood. And so, those are the things that we need to improve relationships. And I don't necessarily think those need to come with police. Police can't solve the reason crime exists.
Jamal, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, what I would do is I would thank the police officers for their service. Thank you for protecting and serving us imperfect human beings. But I would also tell them that just because you deserve respect doesn't mean you have to go out there and earn it every day. Like, wearing that police badge gives you a platform that can amplify your character. So if you're a good person, wearing that police badge is going to provide you with a platform that'll amplify you doing good. If you're a bad person, that police badge gives you a platform to amplify wickedness. So I would just tell police officers to think about that every day and treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yes, Berto.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think all of us here agree that the police are not the solution to this problem. I think if we're going to be investing money, we shouldn't be investing money in hiring more police officers, but giving the 45,000 young people in the city who don't have a job. When I'm in my block, I have people who I used to gangbang with who tell me, "Hey, bro, give me a job, man. I want to get out of here." And I just don't have the job to give them or the way to redirect them. Yes, I have some individuals or some organizations that I can redirect them to, but it's very hard for that individual, for me to tell them to put the guns down if I can't give them something else to do, whether it's a job, whether it's a GED course, whether it's something that would allow that individual to be a productive member of society.
Nika Jones-Tapia, you had your hand up. You wanted to say something.
Yes, and to Jamal's point, it also comes down to training of the police that we have on staff now. With the Cook County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Dart has invested in crisis intervention training. Our staff have a full week of crisis intervention training, mental health training, because we know that we're encountering more and more individuals with mental illness. And not only that, but cultural diversity training. We have to be able to engage appropriately with each other, and that's what we've seen work at the Cook County Sheriff's Office.
Evelyn Diaz, let me fold you in, because one of the things that your organization is concerned with is the connection between poverty and violence. What is the connection in your view?
So, first of all, Chuck's guy took my line about the fifth P of poverty, because I really do think that it's the one thing that's really been missing from the city's policy and for most places policies around violence. Here's what we know. If you take a map of the city of Chicago and you look at where all the poverty is concentrated in the city, and then you take another map and show where the crime is concentrated, you're going to see a near perfect match. So they're definitely linked by place. But then when you look into these communities, what you see is what everybody has been talking about: decades and decades of disinvestment, safety nets are gone, social services have been decimated, economic development has been pretty much missing. Everyone has been affected by that. The children in the communities, the seniors, the moms, but nobody has been affected more than Black men and boys. 45% of Black youth in this city are not in school and not working. And our organization actually identified 500 statutory barriers in Illinois for people who want to work, who can't work because they have some kind of criminal record at any point in their background. So when you take people who are living in poverty and you give them no hope and no opportunity, that is a breeding ground for, for violence and other kinds of social ills. On the flip side of that, we can't really expect kids to do well in school, and we can't expect families to succeed when every single day they're fearful for themselves and for their children. So we need to start to see that poverty and violence are not just linked, they feed each other. And we have to have a conversation about how we're going to address both of those things simultaneously. And, I think...
Well, let me get to Andrew Zopp, because Andrew Zopp, will the mayor's plan address the issue of poverty and its connection to violence?
So I think the mayor's going to talk about investments and continuing what the investments that he's already been making at the community level. So there have been significant. I think you're going to hear more about what he has been doing, understanding exactly what everybody is talking here, the importance of investing in jobs and job creation and creating pathways for that, including pathways for ex-offenders. So I think absolutely that piece of, he didn't have a P for jobs, but I think included clearly in that idea of prevention is you've got to provide hope, which you're absolutely going to hear. I also want to just step back also to talk just for a minute about the policing piece and talk about, of course, we have to have training, and they've already announced some additional training, and there'll be more resource for training, because we have to, as Malcolm has already pointed out, we have to, as part of changing that relationship, with any hope of doing that, we've got to provide the police with the resources and the skills and the training to make those things happen. And I think that's going to...
What kinds of skills?
Well, for example, de-escalation training for handling issues when, instead of escalating, de-escalating, dealing with people with mental illness, as Malcolm has pointed out. So I think expanding that training and making sure that we have the right training, that you have the right people to provide that training, are part of the resources that I think you're going to hear about, both from the superintendent and the mayor over the course of the next 2 days.
Lori Lightfoot, you wanted to weigh in.
Picking up on the points that Andy has made and others have made, the Police Accountability Task Force gave a very specific prescription of things that should be done around the issue of training. And beyond that, and I think it's a thread that runs through many of these comments, is cultural literacy. Right? We live in a city, unfortunately, that still remains one of the most segregated cities in the country. We recruit from those segregated neighborhoods. But we need to make sure that when those kids, and young men, I should say, and women, go into the police academy, and where for many instances they're meeting somebody who is different from them for the first time as a peer, we need to figure out how we invest in the right kind of training to get them to understand that the other is them, and that when they go into neighborhoods that they may not be familiar with, just because it's high crime in particular, doesn't mean that everybody in those neighborhoods is a criminal. And a lot of that is around cultural literacy that's got to be baked into training. And again, I hope that's something that we're going to hear from.
Marshall Hatch, I'd like to get your reaction to a question we received from Alec on our website. And the question is, what are the parents of children who aren't involved in violence doing right?
Obviously involved in child's life, and of course having literally a child-centered family. Some of us have raised our children on the west side. I've raised all my children on the west side of Chicago, and valuing education first. I think that all of that is important, but also we did not necessarily have the same kind of poverty stresses, and we're back to that again. Some of these families are simply doing heroic jobs under very difficult circumstances. I mean, it's just, I had the awful task of being one of my families yesterday, where a kid was 15 years old and small for his age, limbs broken, shot in the head, set on fire beyond recognition, 2 houses from their house. And they have to, and I have to say, they have a wonderful family. Of course, they have all kinds of folk in the family, but by all measures, this was a great kid. And so it means you can do everything right and still become victim of some of the most heinous violence that we can imagine. So again, unless you change the context, I just want to get back to the police in part because it's something I was always interested in. Obviously, the police operate more like an occupying force in these communities. I mean, what you outlined was, I mean, literally a recipe for the disaster that we see. I always wondered
Police would take issue with that.
But if we can require,
they would say we're responding. We go to the areas where we're needed, where crime is happening, and if crime is happening in poverty areas, and if those areas happen to be predominantly African American or Latino, that's where we have to go.
But this was the idea: if we can require police to live in the city as a condition of their employment, could we require them to live in the zip code that they police as a condition of employment? Because until the police become the neighbor and a part of the fabric of the community, it still is the sense of outsiders policing.
Andrew Zopp, has that possibility been raised within City Hall?
Look, I think we clearly have a lot of work to do in changing and rebuilding the relationships between the police and the community. And so that has to happen. A lot of work has gone on that way to happen. But I think two things. First, that the change that has to happen, as the task force that Lori led has pointed out, is significant and is underway. And that is happening. But we're asking a lot. The fact is right now, the situations on the street are very dangerous. Police come in every day. We are seizing more guns in the city than New York and LA combined. So we ask the police to go out and face that, and then we're also compelling them right now to deal with real change. That is a lot. And so that said, I think layering on a zip code requirement right now, I think we need to focus on doing the work we have to do, implementing the recommendations that the task force has recommended, making this commitment to transparency and accountability that we've had, but also we have got to provide, this has to be mutuality. We have to provide some support for people who are functioning. Most of our police officers function every day, come out and do their job in very dangerous situations. It has to be mutual in terms of making sure that we're working together.
Evelyn Diaz, you wanted to say something.
I did. What Andrew is saying is not really a popular position. Right now, our city is not very open to a sympathetic view of our police force. And honestly, Phil, I wish you had a police officer here on the panel with us as well, since we're talking about an issue that's so close to them. But since they're not here,
It's not for want of trying. But go ahead.
I had said to Lori after the police task force came out that as I was reading through the recommendations, great, lots of training, I was looking for an acknowledgement of the experience that police have and the lack of mental health, post-traumatic stress kinds of supports for police officers. And I say that because I have police officers in my family. I did a few ride-alongs when I worked for the city and saw the kinds of conditions that they face every single day. And this is their everyday reality. That piles on after years and years and years. And I just wondered if there was any support for them, any acknowledgement of that. And the answer was no. I think when we talk about healing and we talk about
page citations, Ellen.
Okay. When we're talking about community healing, I think it has to be on both sides. We need to start moving past pointing fingers and creating division. We've been trying that, it's not working. We need to start figuring out what it's going to take to rebuild those relationships, acknowledging that we have some great police officers who do try to do the right thing, and not all of them are evil. And we have to start moving past this this divide.
Victor Dixon, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Phil, I think that we can do something that would help the community, help the violence, and help the police. So there's a saying that nothing stops a bullet like a job. So we know there's evidence One Summer Plus program in Chicago, 43% reduction in arrests for violence when you employed youth, just over the summer. And our work at Safer Foundation with adults, 63% reduction in recidivism, which means that a person coming out of prison didn't violate their parole and didn't commit any new crime. That is a reduction in crime and violence. So we're looking for all these new things. What is the new things? What is the innovative thing? We can probably cut this crime rate significantly by doing some massive employment. We've got to have something above and beyond what the city is currently doing. And they're doing everything they can, but really if they could call on, this is almost like we need FEMA to come in because we have a disaster going on and we need a Marshall Plan for Chicago. We've got to do something to deal with the thing that impacts this problem the most. It is employment, it is income, it is poverty. We got to deal with that.
Andrea Zopp, if there is to be a FEMA type of program, where do the resources come from? Will the mayor outline where the money is coming from to take these steps that can potentially lead to a decrease in violence?
Well, I think what you're hearing, Phil, is and what you will hear is that the city is going to contribute a significant amount of resources to this issue, but that we do have to have, this is a whole city issue, and that the mayor has in the past, and I think he will continue to call on the business community to get the support of others who bring resources to the table. It is something that he has done and he will continue to do, and I expect you will hear more from him on to provide the resources to do some of this work.
And joining us again is Chip Mitchell from WBEZ. Chip, New York has 600 officers per 100,000 residents. Chicago has just 400 officers per 100,000 residents. You've done a lot of reporting on CPD staffing levels. Are there enough officers to effectively police this city?
Well, we have a lot of opinions on that out there, Phil. I will just say that we had a 5-year drop. It started at the end of the Daley administration, ran for 3 years, starting in 2007, and it continued through the first couple of years of the Emanuel administration. So from 2007 to 2012, we had about a 12% drop in sworn police officers. So when you hear cops complaining about staffing shortages and burnout, they're not just blowing smoke, Phil. There was a drop, and the numbers have not increased much since then, since 2012 either. Now, there's a whole nother school of thought. It's not how many officers we have, but what they're doing. And here we have some divergent opinions, too. You have a lot of people calling for a return to these mobile units that can work district-wide or area-wide or even city-wide to go to crime hotspots and saturate these areas. Of course, a lot of those units have been disbanded on and off over the years because of various scandals, including burglars and all sorts of excessive force problems, people feeling like they're being occupied and so on. So those are very controversial. You also hear about people saying we need to totally revitalize community policing in this city. The CAPS program has pretty much all but died on the vine, and community participation has withered, and the department has not put a ton of extra resources to build that back up or develop something to replace the CAPS program. And then, of course, we have a huge problem in this city that does not get nearly as much attention as it deserves, which is the number of murders that are solved, or rather that are not solved. So we're looking at probably something like 600 or 700 murders this year. With luck, they're going to solve by the end of the year maybe 30%. It may be as low as 25%, and those are roughly where the numbers have been for several years now. So think about that. If you kill somebody right now, by the end of the year, you're probably going to be you're not going to be caught. So that has a terrible effect on the streets and on public safety. So there's a very strong argument that it's not just increasing the size of the police department, but it's putting a lot more focus onto detective work after these crimes are committed, Phil.
Chip Mitchell, thank you very much. That's Chip Mitchell from WBEZ's West Side Bureau. We appreciate your joining us, and I see some hands here. Let's go with Eddie Bocanegra.
So this morning, there was in New Yorker, there was an article by Alice Kolowitz, who actually was just pointing out and highlighting the number of shootings that are unsolved or homicides. And I heard Chip mention right now how, the idea of saturating certain hotspots in the city of Chicago to reduce the violence. But my question really is, what does it look like to saturate these hot spots with actually services in a community, to provide actually more of a, as opposed to taking a punitive approach to this issue, which is one of the P's of the mayor, how do we best support some of these communities? And I think that what I've heard today too from Evelyn Diaz and a few others, you know, this whole notion around healing. I mean, for the Y, healing is prevention for us. We understand the root causes of violence is often because of early exposure to trauma. And we recognize that in many cases, and there's a lot of science to support this, that people who have been perpetrators of violence have also been victims. And in many cases, they're the same people. So for us, it's like, how do we really heal from all this? I mean, I think that's a bigger question. And I think there's amazing models that are out there that really kind of addresses those issues. And I think the other part that I would say is that you have people who are in a very front line of these issues. People who are returning back from prison, United States veterans, your people who are peer educators, who actually have the will and the passion to be able to serve in these communities. But we have to also think about, like, how do we equip them, train them, so they could also be advocates in our communities as well.
Malcolm, if you had the opportunity to talk to a police officer or a group of police officers into how they could be more effective in dealing with violence or interacting with communities, what would you say to them?
I wouldn't say much, and why is because I think let's not point the finger, but let's begin to ask a few questions, right? There's always this idea that we need to rebuild relationships with police. I'm a generational kid. I mean, I come from a generation before me, and my mom comes one before her. And there's never been, in my community on the west side of Chicago, a sort of relationship with police that wasn't one where the police was putting a foot on the neck of the community. So when we talk about rebuilding this friendly relationship, for people who look like me, police have always been what feels like an occupational force. And so then we must ask, why is that? Why is it that communities, we see this immense amount of poverty on the west side of Chicago? I'll tell you what, about that question, is that the people born in that poverty did not create the poverty that they were born in, right? So we begin to have to ask larger questions about the world that we live in, the time that we live in, and begin to shift not only they're very tangible things that a lot of smart people here at this panel should be in these offices and these meetings more often than not have for you, but as a cultural worker, as an artist, I think also we have to shift even the way we talk about violence in this city. We keep saying everyone needs to be involved, but when we talk about the south side, the west side, it's a violent place. When you call that place violent, you call everybody violent. When police are patrolling those neighborhoods, no amount of training is going to change the 30 plus years of racial insensitivity that we have in this country, or racism, right? These officers who aren't a part of the community have been trained via, whether it's the media, whether it's historically in the books that they read.
I've got to interrupt you because I've got to ask you, based on what you just said, so what you're saying is that there was never a relationship to begin with.
There has been one. It's just, in my experience,
right.
There's never been one that's been this happy-go-lucky relationship, and getting back to that,
is that not a happy-go-lucky relationship, but is at least a respectful relationship a possibility?
Sure, out of fear, if you want to be respected out of fear, but I don't think that's where we should go. I don't think that's where we want to go. We've all said it. We've talked about jobs. We talked about support, and support is not arresting a young person. In the city of Chicago, there are more police. Well, maybe this isn't true, but the feeling is there are more police than counselors in schools on the south and west sides. Young people who might get into a fight at school over some shoes or a boy or whatever are now going to prison the moment that they interact with a police officer, because that's really all, or at least what most police think they can do, is arrest their way out of a problem.
Lori Lightfoot.
Phil, we gotta have more hope than that, right? This is a relationship that is clearly fractured. In many instances doesn't work well, but it's a relationship where both sides need each other. We cannot give up the possibility of mending the relationship, bridging the gulf, whatever cliche you want to use. We've got to be there. But I want to pick up on one point that Chip Mitchell made, and that's about the clearance rate on homicides and shootings. That is a fundamentally difficult problem that has to be addressed. The new chief of the detectives, Melissa Staples, I know is focused on this issue, but she's got to figure out a way, along with her supervisors, to incentivize those detectives who are assigned these cases to go out there, use old-fashioned shoe lever, use modern technology. You've got to solve those homicides. We see people every month at the police board meeting who are coming, families whose members have been struck down by violence, who are looking for some hope. And if we can't give them hope that the police are working hard to solve the crime, to bring the people who perpetrated the crime to justice, then we're going to lose yet another generation of folks who feel like the police have no hope or answer to them. And one last point that I want to raise that we haven't talked about. The issue of violence, obviously, as we've all been talking about, is a multifaceted problem. As Victor Dixon has said, we've got to have a Marshall Plan. But part of that plan is we've got to ask our federal partners to step up. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, they also have a role to play. We can't put all of this on the backs, from a law enforcement perspective, on the backs of the Chicago Police Department. We need to bring all those folks around the table and ask every single one of them, are you using everything in your toolkit to help address this problem? And I don't think we've had enough conversation about that.
Amy Campanelli, according to Paris's report, the AP is saying anyway that the mayor is going to call, and I'll ask Andrea Zopp about this in a second, the mayor is going to call for the hiring of 500 police officers. Some people might think it's counterintuitive that you applaud that as a public defender. How come?
Well, I applaud, and my caveat is that if we do hire more police officers, that they be trained. And they be trained in effective community policing. And I think that what Malcolm says, I want him to have hope. He is the one who is saying he fears the police. He doesn't have any hope. He doesn't have any trust. I believe, and what Lori was saying, that we can have good community policing. They have to be there and be proactive, not just reactive. They're a part of that community. We have to think that the police are part of that community of the family. So if they come and they get to know the members of the community, and they talk to people on the street, and they're there when there is no trouble, right? Then when there is trouble, people will come to them and help them solve crimes. There's no question about it. They will come to the detectives, but they don't trust the detectives, because when they go to the detectives, they get arrested, or they get the foot in the neck, or they get their houses searched without a warrant. So these are decades of these kinds of violations that of police that I see when the clients come to me. And they say their house has been, they've been arrested wrongfully, or forced to a confession, or been, hurt by the police. Those kind of things do not instill trust. You have to build the trust, and I think we can do it. I think, Malcolm, that we can do it. We just have to, all of us, work together to make that happen.
Malcolm, are you persuaded?
No. But I just do not think the answer is in policing. I think policing, specifically in America, in the country that locks up more people than any other country in the world, we have a serious problem in the way we think about humanity. That's what I'm talking about. When we think about whether it's a young person who commits a crime, what is that? You know what I mean? What is crime and what is safety? To me, a young person committing a crime and being locked up and thrown in prison for the rest of their lives with no possibility for redemption, and 500 more cops who have the same idea of doing that to people, that's what we need to shift. The way we are thinking about violence. What is violence? Closing 50 schools is a lot more violent than a young man on the corner, to me, right? What is violence? What is crime? And what is safety? And I think as a society as a whole, we need reformation of that type of idea.
Berto, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think that the question here is misguided. I don't think, do we need to invest in more police is not really the question. I think the question is, what do we need to invest in so that young people can succeed? And I don't think police is one of them. I think that if we look at the salary of a police officer, $45,000 that could be used to do youth programming in communities that are affected by violence could go way further than $45,000 on a police officer. Secondly, I think that if we're going to be talking about the way community policing is done right now, in addition to a zip code, we should be thinking about a community service requirement for police officers so that they can be involved in the neighborhood. Because I've seen it. I ran the Hoops in the Hood program in Back of the Yards, and I saw 2 police officers being coaches for one of our teams, being involved. But that was 2 out of how many police officers do we have in my community? many. So I think that's one thing that I would say about that.
Nika Jones-Tapia, you wanted to weigh in.
Emphasize enough the fact that the jail is still a part of the community, and just because we have so many fathers and mothers locked away at the jail today, we have over 8,300 individuals in the Cook County Jail. You know, just because those individuals are there doesn't mean that they're not still a part of the community. We could really use big businesses and agencies to come into the jail and continue to build jobs, skills training, interview skills training, in connecting with families. You know, the sheriff has developed a number of programs to try to reconnect individuals before they even go back into the community. We could use the support of the community that these individuals are going back to, churches, schools, and, you know, as long as we continue to think that once a person is incarcerated, they're cut off from the family or cut off from the neighborhood, we'll continue to have a problem that's pervasive. Those individuals are still an effective part of the community. We have to see them as such.
Victor Dixon, I saw you nodding your head vigorously.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jamal. We do need to rethink some things. I mean, do we redeem people? I mean, how do we open up opportunity to people? How do we change the way we look at people and understand maybe because someone made a mistake at one point in their life, they're not a mistake in their life. In total, is not a mistake. We need businesses to open their doors and to allow people to come in. We need people to get over these irrational fears that they have about those other people in those neighborhoods and those communities, and realize that these folks have value, they can contribute, they just need an opportunity. And that's very important.
Andrea Zopp, we're running out of time. Can you raise the curtain on more on what the mayor might be saying on Thursday?
Well, I think we've touched on a lot of the themes that you're going to hear from the mayor. We talked about, and while I respect the understanding that $45,000 invested in a young person is important, the fact is we have a serious problem with violence in this city, and for every one of those murders, there's a family and a victim that we have to, and shootings that we have to deal with. And so we are going to invest resources in I expect you're going to hear from both the mayor and the superintendent. We're going to invest in the resources. You're also going to hear the other part, the other P. We have to invest in communities. We have to invest in jobs. So I think those themes, both that policing is part of it, we cannot police our way out of it, that prevention and investment is part of it, and also this other underlying theme, we all have to come together. And then I just want to touch on one thing that Malcolm said that is just really important. You know, he talks about the police like they're monolithic. They're all the same. They're all the same. They all don't respect people. They've never worked with communities of color. That's just not true and not fair. Just like it's wrong for the police to go into communities and think that everyone in that community of color thinks and acts the same. Yeah. That is the barrier we have to get through.
For the record, police, sure, I want to humanize police, but when you put on that badge, you are a part of a system in which is about policing, and policing absolutely is disrespectful. Policing absolutely is.
It paints with too broad a brush.
Right,
and it really does.
But either way, my real point to you though is that really
in this country, via the words of the mouth of our president, is literally. It is disproportionate. It is failing, or if whoever depends on who you are, it is succeeding. It is locking up people at enormous amounts of. Tell me that is what policing should look like. The way our prison system looks, the way Cook County is one of the biggest mental health providers in the.
But if we talk about it,
tell me that's how it's supposed to be.
Excuse me, Malcolm, Andrea, we're almost out of time, and I want to get
two important but separate issues, and that's the point that we have. It's not just policing though, Malcolm, and that's really the real point that you have to talk about.
Reverend Hatch, what do you want to hear the mayor say on Thursday?
Let me say this. It's going to be very difficult to heal these breaches if people's experience with the police are not validated. I mean, every time we have this critique of the police, then we have to say, well, there are some good ones. Well, I mean, obviously, that's the case. But people's experiences in these communities are valid experiences.
I'm sorry.
And I just said I had the unfortunate task at this scene where Betty Jones and Quintonio Greer were killed, and had to do both those funerals
Sounds horrific.
It was horrific.
Sounds horrific.
And I mean, people's experiences in these communities. You know, Che Ryanfest Smith just had an article in Cranes, and he and I talk all the time about you really can't have reconciliation until you have healing, and healing when there's some type of truth that is embraced, that this is how police really have functioned, going back to John Burge and all of those experiences. Those experiences need to be validated before we can move on.
Okay, real quickly, because we're almost out of time. We have a minute. Evelyn, real quickly, what do you want to hear the mayor say?
Every voice is valid. I want to hear him say that the community residents should be part of impacting, shaping the policies that affect their lives. And so Malcolm's voice is valid, but everybody else's voice is valid too. And we have to start paying attention to what people are saying, even if it sounds like it's going to be hard. We can do this. There's no question about it in my mind that everything that we're talking about today is totally doable. We have to change our mindset and get to work together.
And that's going to have to be the last word. I really appreciate all of you being here. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Our many thanks to the panel that spent the entire hour with us here in the studio, sincerely. And thanks also to WBEZ's Chip Mitchell, and I hope you join us tomorrow night live at 7. Overhauling the state's education funding model has been a legislative priority in recent years. We examine one model in particular that's gained interest in Springfield. And on Thursday, we will have full coverage of the mayor's speech on public safety, the very topics we've been talking about tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Phil Ponce, and I thank you for watching. And again, my many thanks to all of the panelists. And my thanks to you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.